We're talking in this session about a very exciting project that I'm personally in love with, but Anna and Ines will tell us everything about it. We're going to look at how The Guardian uses AI to analyze articles, mostly from the lens of a specific project that last year and currently still The Guardian has been working on in partnership with Ines' team at Explosion, which is how to use machine learning to analyze quotes, which is a fascinating topic. It doesn't sound maybe so fascinating when I say it, but trust me, you will learn how fascinating that is. And I would love to tell you more about that. I will let Anna and Ines tell us about the project, but just a little bit of behind the scenes first, because it's really exciting for me to talk about this project because it is actually the result of another project of JournalismAI, the collab challenges that we were hosting last year, which were kind of like the little brother of the fellowship that came up this year. And they are collaborative, as the name said. So Anna's team of The Guardian was collaborating with lots of other news organizations from all over Europe and the Middle East, and in particular with AFP from France on this project. And we looked at the concept of modular journalism, which is a complicated maybe concept, but very useful one that we'll look at into this conversation. And this project is a very concrete and very exciting example about what that can be. I feel like I said enough already. This is not me to tell you about the project. So Anna, Ines, welcome on stage. I would love for the two of you to tell us about yourself, your team, and your organization. Maybe people in the room being journalists are much more familiar with The Guardian than with the Explosion. So Ines, why don't we start with you and you tell us about yourself and your fantastic team.
Sure. Yeah. First, thanks for having me. It's really exciting to see so many interesting people joining the session. I'm Ines. I'm the co-founder of Explosion, and we're a company specializing in developer tools for AI and specifically natural language processing, which is basically analyzing and working with text. And one of our probably most popular projects is a library called SpaCy, which developers can use to build these pipelines and models, and also build combinations of AI systems, more advanced models, and rule-based approaches. And we also develop Prodigy, which is an annotation tool, which also The Guardian used to create training data for machine learning models, because that's also incredibly important. And that's also kind of how this collaboration came about. And actually, I've always had a soft spot for journalism, because before I went into tech full-time, I actually worked in media here in Berlin. Kind of, on the other side, there was more marketing and sales focus, but I also worked very closely with journalists, and these use cases, especially in the investigative area, is something, that we always love to support, because I think that's incredibly important, and also where the technology can really make a difference.
That's A, fantastic to hear, B, something I'm going to follow up with. So stay on your toes. For that, Anna, happy to come to you. Anna has been a friend and a partner of JournalismAI from the very beginning 4 years ago. So thank you for being with us again. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your team, and maybe if you want, you can tell us about the project, and then we start the conversation around it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for having me, indeed. And although I'm a physicist by trade, but I actually spent, too many years in journalism. So I did a lot of different stuff, started freelancing first, and then, like social media editor and multimedia producer or whatever. So it was a journey. So I know journalism very well, and I think that this also helps maybe when when we work with newsrooms on all these NLP projects, etc. It helps to understand or envisage basically the final product and what exactly we are trying to build. But we at the same time we involve the editors very, very closely. They work with us on everything that we do. Because I think it's just super important having their feedback all the time. So it just keeps us focused on what's important, actually. So no, that's great. In terms of last year project, indeed, the theme of JournalismAI last year was modular journalism, but we thought that it would be very nice to actually understand the diversity of our content and the sources that we use in our journalism. And quotes came out as, you know, as this very nice module that you can describe very well, but also you can, if you are able to extract and co-reference this, and this is the hard part, and co-reference this to the right speaker, then you can actually run so many other things on top of this, because you can think about, well, what about gender or ethnicity, you know, and if we are quoting women, how long these quotes are, you know, versus when we quote male, and you know, there's so many different questions that we can answer looking at this data. And it was a very fruitful collaboration. I think that we did a lot of annotation, obviously using Prodigy, but and it's a fantastic tool, guys. I mean, that was the first when I joined the Guardian, because before the Guardian I worked for the BBC, and when I joined the Guardian, that was my first task. You know, can we just have a license for Prodigy, please? So yeah, but it's indeed a very nice tool, highly customizable, and we basically, yeah, we really like adding stuff, removing stuff, you know, like customizing you know, the Prodigy to for each project that we you know, we work with this tool. So that was great. But maybe what I really wanted to point out, because it's basically my motto, because I think that we quite often underestimate how much time we have to spend on scoping the project, and also on looking at the quality of data we are going to collect and how we can ensure the quality of data. Because manual annotation, it's very tricky. I mean, it's, you know, there are so many ways that you can introduce, you know, like a lot of noise and disagreement between annotators, etc. So this is why, you know, last year we spent a lot of time, and actually this year the same with Entity Linker, we did the same. But last year we spent a lot of time discussing in a group, you know, how we see the quote, what is the quote, and you know, how we can describe this. And we created a very nice, very concise annotation tool, or sorry, annotation guide. But all these discussions, that was very, very revealing, to be honest. You know, when you sit in one room with different annotators, and you just ask a question like, what's going on? You know, how would I annotate this or that? So we actually enjoyed the process. It's a very satisfactory. I think that you know, doing this. But yeah, I'll stop talking now.
Yeah, just to add something to that, like, this is everything you describe here was also really what I found fascinating and exciting about the project, because it's also really in line with the vision we had for building our tools, because we've always seen annotation as something iterative. And because if ultimately you're trying to train a machine learning model to replicate decisions, and for that, ideally the decisions need to be consistent. And unfortunately, humans are quite bad at consistency, whereas machines are pretty good at that. So you want to create the data in a consistent way, and that takes a lot of trial and error, even a lot of iteration. Yeah, so it was always important for us to build a tool that can basically support that. And especially also nowadays, people still have this idea of big data where you need billions, trillions of examples. That's not even true anymore with the technology these days. You can get by with very small data sets, but you want good data sets. And that's where a lot of the challenge is. So Prodigy was really designed as a developer tool that you can customize script. You try out one idea with one label set, start annotating, realize, nah, the categories are too confusing, people disagree too much, let's try again. And then you keep doing that until you're ready to scale it up and say, hey, let's really create our data set this way.
Yes, and unfortunately sometimes, and we had an example like this when we just parked one project because we just couldn't agree. I mean, just, you know, the categories, if you are talking about, we were trying to replicate, well, it's not, it wasn't absolutely the same, but Mati, it's probably, you know, you are more familiar with this, like users' news needs, something that started from the BBC, and it was a very interesting categorization of the content, but based some kind of, you know, based from the user's perspective, basically trying to answer the question why they click on this or that article. And these categories were like update me, divert me, motivate me, whatever, you know, you kind of, you know, you understand this, the feeling, right? And we tried and tried and tried. We had, you know, several iterations, and we just realized that these categories, these categories were too subjective. I mean, you know, just annotators, multiple annotators couldn't actually agree, you know, where this article belongs to, right? And we tried to refine, and still, you know, failed. And we saw that, well, maybe, you know, maybe that's it, you know, we didn't even move towards annotating a lot of data or you know, building a prototype or whatever, because we ran some annotation tests basically before even, you know, asking people to annotate, because we wanted to understand, you know, can we see a signal, you know, even you know, running very, very small tests. So sometimes you even, you know, you stop there.
Yeah. No, I think that makes a lot of sense, and I think it also shows like language does not fit so neatly into categories because it's language, and that's also why it's important to, you know, even if you are running these projects, you want people who are like have a connection to what you're doing there. You can't just outsource that, and I feel like that's also something that's often not talked about enough in the field, or especially, you know, in the more AI machine learning focused domain, because there people are very, very focused on developing models, algorithms, but actually the data is what makes the difference. And yeah, you can't just like outsource that, ask someone, hey, hey, annotate all quotes, sounds easy, right? And get it back, train a model, and you're done. That's not how it works. And yeah, there's so many even very basic things or very basic concepts that most humans think, hey, that's like an easy decision, end up being quite complex. I think I even remembered, I think my co-founder, when he was I think doing his PhD or being a postdoc, I think they also had an annotation project where they spent ages debating whether the forehead is part of the face. Like, I'm sure, you know, we could also have this discussion here and people would agree, disagree. There's so many of these nuances that might seem easy and then really need a lot of work.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, it's a very good point about outsourcing, right? Because, you know, sometimes we think that, okay, we can ask Mechanical Turks or whatever just to create this training data. And we last time when we basically, you know, parked this project, one thing that we learned, that we had different groups of annotators, and we asked, one group was very kind of internal, involved in this project, so we had a lot of discussions between us, although it was a big group of people. And then we asked other departments, you know, just who had no idea about the project, you know, but we asked them to annotate and help us with this. And the agreement inside our group was, well, surprise, surprise, higher than outside this group, right? So it already gives you some understanding that if people are kind of disconnected from all these internal discussions, but the model you are training, the model, you know, didn't participate in all your discussions, you know? So this will be, you know, like training someone who had no idea, you know, what was going on, you know, and how you decided to do this and that. So that's a very good indicator if you are doing something right or not, because, you know, and it's honestly just kind of wasting your time and money if you are trying to do something without a very good definition of what you are trying to do.
I am a strong believer at events like this one that the best conversations are those when the moderator is not needed. So I'm loving this. So Anna, Ines.
Okay, that's great, because I actually felt bad. I was like, oh, we didn't even let you talk. Yeah.
That's what I want. This is space for you. No, all jokes aside, I feel and hope that everyone feel that your enthusiasm for this kind of project is really coming off the screen, and it's fantastic. And I mean, we have already mentioned so many things to follow up that we're not going to have time. I just wanted to acknowledge, good to see the first question, so keep them coming in the Q&A box. Thank you, Sean, for sharing and finding the GitHub link for the project and sharing it in the chat. I shared the link to the Prodigy page as well. So that's all good. Lots of interaction going. So thank you all for this. I don't even know where to start because I literally have so many notes about things I want to follow up with, but let's give it a try. Ines, I wanted to come back to you. You talked already about, this project and how cool it was and how important it was for you to be able to have this opportunity to work with journalists. I wonder if you can elaborate for that from a personal point of view, in terms of like why you feel that working with journalism is so interesting. And maybe if you can tell us also from your team, your colleagues that have been working with Anna's team, what did they tell you about this interaction? Was it the first time for them working with the news organizations? Was it that different than working with a partner that it's from another industry? I'm just very curious to hear more about this.
So first, of course, I like journalism because, I believe in like the impact it has on society. So that's, of course, journalism is not journalism, but there's, that's why, I think it's important, and I think anything we can do to help journalists be better at their jobs and more efficient is good. But I think also in terms of really working on the technology, it was very satisfying to see people who really think about language, because that's sort of inherent to what you do, right? It's like you have to think about the nuances of how to present things, what language means, what words mean, what concepts mean, and how they are communicated in text. And that is quite a different perspective than other people have who might come in from different industries and are not immediately like focused on even defining these annotation schemes, resolving ambiguities, like even the concept that probably every journalist will be familiar with a style guide. And especially if you work at like larger organizations like The Guardian, you have like rules for pretty much everything. Like, people can't just arbitrarily spell things. I remember when I worked in media, we had I think we developed a style guide that was based on The Guardian meets New York Times, how to spell things, how to do things consistently. And that's just something, that's a big part of what you do. And that also translates quite well to creating good and high quality data for training a machine learning model. So that was pretty fun. And also in that collaboration, we didn't have to explain the importance of consistency, or I think it even felt easier to explain like, hey, here's how the model works. If you want to train a model, yes, you don't need to understand all the ins and outs of like the specific algorithms and the maths behind the scenes, but have a rough idea of like, okay, here are the examples. Here's what the model will be looking at when you train it, and here are the implications of it. That is all very important. And I do think that, journalists, they might not know this yet, but they actually bring in a lot of very valuable skills for working with AI technologies.
A shot of self-confidence for all the journalists in the room. So, woohoo! Thank you, Ines, for that. Anna, I wanted to come back to you because I think it's very interesting what we're discussing, and we're rushing through, so maybe I want to slow down a little bit and help the attendees. We talked about some concepts already. We mentioned co-referencing, we mentioned annotation. You mentioned the super interesting question of your team having to reflect on what is a quote. So I was wondering if you could expand a little bit on this reflection and this conversation you had in your team, and maybe help journalists in the room that may not be so familiar with also understand what does annotation mean, and how did you come up with the annotation guidelines as a result for this project?
Yeah, so we actually discussed this with editorial because we wanted to understand if our description of a quote actually works for them. And we, in a way, we wanted to give them, we want to track what would be useful in the newsroom, right? In this instance, it was easy in a way because we decided that we can use the description of a quote from Wikipedia. But that meant that we decided not to include paraphrasing. So basically, you know, if a journalist just, you know, paraphrasing someone, we wouldn't annotate this as a quote. Another thing that we we kind of struggled a little bit because we, when we started annotating, and by annotations, what we mean, it's just a process of looking at the article and, you know, I would say, and indicating the start and the end of a quote, and then a start of the end of a, we call it cue. So it's like a saying word, like, you know, someone said, told, whatever. So this kind of verb. And then who actually said this? And the problem with the next step is quite often we said, like, you know, he said or she said. So all we had is just she or he. And the real name of this person would be somewhere, you know, sometimes a couple of paragraphs before the quote. So the next step, you know, would be to train a different model, which can find in the text, which can find who is she or who is he, or if it's an organization, like, you know, what the name of this organization. So this is what we call co-reference resolution in this sense. So the way that so the challenges that we had with this also were that sometimes journalists quote, well, they use quotation marks when it's not a quote. It's actually, you know, like non-standard English, you know, term or whatever, like walk. And you can come up with different things, right? So we really wanted to build a model which can differentiate between these two cases, and we managed to do that. So that was nice. But another thing that we thought about, and that would come kind of, you know, like a next step after you run a model on all your articles. With the Guardian journalism, quite often you have so many quotes in one article. So basically the whole article is just quoting, you know, this and that, and maybe just a couple of lines between quotes. And we thought that, well, we need to understand which quotes from each article would be actually, you know, worth tracking, basically, you know, and worth storing, because otherwise you end up with a huge database of, you know, every quote, you know, how can you come up with a model which can tell you the meaningful quote, basically, right? And the quote that is worth actually, you know, storing and looking at, right? And surfacing, or, you know, including in your search, etc. And we haven't done this yet, but we before that, and I think that it would work quite nicely with this. We actually, as a hack, basically, as a hack example, we worked with our comments because we run comments on our articles in The Guardian. And we built a model very quickly, built a model which was able to surface meaningful comments. So like comments which really are valuable from the editorial point of view. And it was based on the training data set that we didn't create it, but it was an output from our editorial workflow, because our editors pinned the best comments anyway. So we have this flag, right? You know that, you know, the comment was pinned. So we basically use this as a training data set to surface the best or, you know, more kind of valuable comments. So we thought that we could have the same approach and actually build something for quotes, because you don't need to store a quote when it's just like, you know, a couple of words, and it doesn't actually, you know, it doesn't carry any meaning and value in the long term, especially. So the other challenge after that was the co-reference resolution. So basically finding the right speaker, right, for each quote. And we found it very tricky. So it's not easy. I think that the Guardian use case differs from very standard, very nice sentence when you can find the right speaker inside the sentence, or something like this. I mean, which works very, very, very nice in very narrow use cases. So we had articles. We had to build these relationships, crossing many paragraphs, back and forth. So when we started building this model, when we started annotating and trying to understand, how it might work, we just saw that, we are not sure that it's going to work. So what we are actually doing, we pitched these projects to UCL students. So we, fingers crossed, we are going to work, together with UCL, trying to come up maybe with an alternative solution for that, or maybe some shortcut for our specific use case. But looking forward actually to this collaboration. So yeah.
Thank you, Anna. That was a great explanation. It helped myself understand things better. So I really, really appreciate it. I have a million things to follow up on, but I want to start going also to the questions that we have from the attendees. And Ines, I'll start with you. There is a question for you from Arki, which is representative of a question that we get a lot in this project, which is about languages. So Arki is saying that most NLP software is geared towards Latin-based Western language, of course, that are very limited for other parts of the world, like Southeast Asia he's referring to. So how could we work to address the inequalities we're using AI? He's asking. And I guess we can expand the question also to hear about your team. I know it's very international as well. So how do you consider this question, if in any way, or what do you see as opportunities to improve in this field?
Yeah, I think it's definitely true. Like, as a rule of thumb, the more similar languages to English, the better a lot of technologies work, because that's also the language that most people work in, and most corpora exist. Also, actually, volumes of text that can be used, that was annotated. So that's definitely true. I do think one problem is definitely, well, the lack of data resources. Even if you have a low resource language, there is a lot of research that's going into that, especially at the moment, creating corpora, even creating both raw text corpora, annotated corpora, with linguistic annotations, which obviously is always, a lot more work than just, collecting text or doing something more basic. And then, of course, there's always the use case where, hey, you might actually want to you have some data and you want to train something that's specific to your data. There's also, even different methodologies in terms of machine learning or NLP are more relevant in some languages than others. Like, for example, in English, if you just want to do the task of like, hey, I have a sentence, I want to divide it by words, as in, linguistically motivated units, that's like pretty simple. Split on white space, add some rules on top, you're done. In a language like even Chinese, there's a space does not indicate a word. That you might have to actually train a system in order to segment into meaningful words. So there is we also believe that hey, you can't just build a one size fits all solution that just magically works for all languages. I think, especially if you really care about more in-depth, more linguistically motivated insights into the text, I do think it's quite important to put custom work into that. And yeah, we've gotten some really cool contributions from the community to SpaCy, adding some basic capabilities. We've also had community members track down good resources to train from, run some experiments so we can support more languages. But it's definitely, something that's very important. But also, there are always ethical considerations as well. Like, if you are making things available, especially for more niche languages, who will actually use these systems? Like, we've had some discussions with people who wanted to build systems and open source solutions for languages. In countries where, we do have to talk about who will benefit from systems that make it easier to analyze, say, comments on the internet, for example, including regimes that oppress their own citizens. And that's also something that's an important consideration.
extremely important one that probably deserves a full conversation by itself. So mental note for another conversation here between the three of us where we can expand on these ethical considerations. But thank you, Ines. Anna, shown as a question in the chat, which is related to something I was going to ask you anyways, so that's perfect. Anna mentioned the possibility of running analysis on the persons identified in articles as being quoted, for example, to gain insights on the gender distribution. As you build, have you, as the Guardian, build a model to do such analysis, or are there plans to, and what are the challenges? It's something that fascinated me a lot as well when you did this project, the idea also of the insights you gain as a side note of doing this work on quotes. So can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, we every newsroom, has this question, how diverse their content is. Because this is something that is very, very hard to track and very hard to analyze if you do not have metadata attached to every single piece of content. And my kind of involvement into this and my passion around that this topic is also, I started working on this at the BBC. We had a famous 50-50 project that was a global initiative trying to reach 50-50 parity, basically in people we quote, we ask to come with us on air, etc., etc. So, and I was running this project in the digital online, basically, looking at online output of our BBC newsroom, and it was actually, it's a very interesting one. I will come to the Guardian, but I think that this one is might be quite interesting for people to also understand and to discuss. Because we really wanted to to progress in this space as quick as possible, but we didn't have any automated tools or to help us with this task. So we asked producers to manually log every single piece of content produced by the newsroom, attaching names of people mentioned in this piece of content with gender. So it was a huge effort, manual effort for people to, but because everyone was so kind of happy to be part of this, so we had a very, very huge kind of buy-in for this project. But that also meant, and at the same time, I was working on automating the pipeline, right? So making this, running like, using SpaCy and some other resources to do that. So I basically had this very interesting validation data set, which was produced manually by producers, right, in the newsroom. So I could actually run my pipeline and see where my algorithm didn't agree with manual annotation, right? And when I start looking at this, we just realized that, well, humans were making mistakes, like a lot of mistakes. And that was, and I remember that, having this conversation in the newsroom was very, very useful and revealing, right? Because usually the problem that data scientists, quite often they have, when they have discussions like this, journalists quite often think that, well, if you automate something, it should be 100% accurate, right? That's it. So if the machine, gives you one mistake, one error, just like, no, that's it. We are not going to use it. But showing them that actually, they are also prone to, to these mistakes, right? And it's more the conversation where this threshold is, right? And how comfortable we are with this level of accuracy, right? Versus human accuracy, because it's not 100% accurate anyway, right? So if we can agree on that, that's a good starting point. And I think that it really changed the perception of the newsroom towards all this kind of projects and discussions around AI and like how we can build something, how we can automate, etc. So this is one part of my answer. And second, indeed, so my team is working on a project where we are looking at, it's slightly separate from the quote extraction project, but we indeed are looking at people we mention in our articles, also bylines, so basically our authors, etc. And we are trying to assign likely gender, and I stress that this is likely gender because it's if you use any sort of ML in this space, it's binary. So you cannot get away from this, and we know that binary doesn't represent the whole variety of the world around us. So we are also using Wikidata, and we first looking for a name in Wikidata. And again, there are so many questions like, this name might not be this person, but it gives you, some sort of, okay, so we at least, we have two different sources and we can assign a likely gender. But also a very important point when you work on a project like this is looking at trends and aggregated numbers. So we are not saying that, well, this person who is female or whatever in your article, right? So it's not like this, right? Just looking at the trend over time and trying to understand, how we can change the trend. So we basically we are representing better the world around us and our audiences and everything else. I'm actually very excited because we are nearly there. So we really, fingers crossed, will wrap up the project before Christmas. So it will be our Christmas present for the team internally, because we spent so much time on this, but also for the newsroom. So yeah, very, very excited. It's a very interesting project. And just, one note aside that we tried some kind of, open source solutions for this. It didn't work for us that well. So that's why we decided to build something ourselves.
I think also just to add to this, I think what you just said points out some really important aspects for how I think this kind of development should be approached, because ultimately, you need to acknowledge that, hey, you'll never have 100% accuracy, not with humans, not with a machine, and they make different mistakes. Humans make mistakes based on inattention. Machines don't do that, but they might make different mistakes. So at some point, depending on what you want to do with that outcome, you always want to at least ideally have both in a loop. And you also want to be in a position where you can kind of reason about every step that you're taking. Like even what you said, hey, then we thought about, let's maybe use Wikidata, let's try this, let's try this. These are all decisions you have to make as a developer, and it's not magic. You can't just download something magical off the internet and it will do that for you. And also the decisions you make matter, which again also means, hey, you should have a team in-house, and also actually you should have a team that represents the diversity you're looking for, because you might make bad decisions or only think about, it's with names and gender, it's super easy to come in from this very Western centric perspective, where our names are quite different from a lot of other names across the world. And even, the assumption that the first name, last name assumption does not hold up. So yeah, again, I think that's why, if you really care about these things, you want to build a workflow where you have control over every step and a team that can help make the right decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. I cannot agree more, because I think that every time we talk about diversity and how we can change things, etc., and why we have biases in our ML solutions or whatever, well, we have to start from us. I mean, people who build these things, we need to make sure that our teams are diverse, right? And that we look at this problem from different perspective every time. So that's absolutely
it's maybe, and a lot of people might not like that, because it can be an uncomfortable situation you might have to have. And I think that's very important, because there's a lot of work in ML, AI, ethics, bias, and some of that focuses on the actual algorithms, which is very important. But there's also this whole aspect of what are you building, why, and how is it going to be used? And the same model you train could be incredibly useful for one context and absolutely harmful in another. Like you might be, maybe you want to analyze historical articles where, yes, everyone's male and that's like historic and that's not great, but you might train a model that's like very accurate and helps you a lot. And that same model will be absolutely disastrous if you employ that, if you deploy that to run on your Guardian articles. Or do you surface the predictions, or do you have a human step in between? Like the thing you mentioned with the comments, that's like, you know, naively people might think, oh, this is awesome. You know, you don't have to have the editors pick the top comment and you just have the system do it automatically. And there are always so many edge cases. It's easy to trick that. Like you could just imagine what might happen. Someone might write a comment that's absolutely awful, but awful in such a way that it confuses the model and might make the model hallucinate high predictions because it's something the model has never seen before. And then it's like, oh yeah, that gets a high score. It's the top pinned comment, and yeah, people will rightly complain, and I think you'd rightly face a shitstorm over yeah, your use of technology in harmful ways. And I think that's important to keep in mind. And I also remember that's something you said early on, like reputation is important. Like we don't just want to automate everything, we want the outcome to be good. And yeah, absolutely.
And it's a very good point, because you know there are so many people out there who love playing the system, you know. It's just like, and you can, yeah, absolutely, you can write a comment that would be picked up, you know, by any automated algorithm, and that's absolutely right. But we I don't know, you know, my team always focuses on stuff that we can basically, you know, run like a suggestion to editors and not like a totally automated thing. And I think that it's probably the best way, because indeed it takes time, right, to do some mundane kind of things. And but if you can suggest, even if we are talking about comments, like 10 comments, and you just, you know, an editor just picks the best, that would be much better than you know, reading 100 comments or, you know, 200 comments, right, to choose one. So
yeah, you can also feed that back into the iterative system. Like if you find something where someone tricked the system, you know, you need to keep annotating data. People also, what people talk about will change. Like if you look at the internet comments today versus the internet comments 10 years ago, that changes. And that also points out the importance of custom data annotation. It's not static. You don't train your model, it's not going to stay that way. And also it means, well, even existing corpora, academic corpora can be quite old. If you want to create your own, and yeah, it never stops. Like it's an ongoing process.
Sometimes in life, you have one of those moments of realization when you recognize so clearly a mistake you have made. And my mistake was to schedule just 30 minutes for this chat, because I would love to continue and go further for another hour. This has been incredible. Ines, Anna, thank you so much for the conversation, and especially I think it's perfect to end on this note, the last part where we talked about bias and the importance to recognize that and be mindful of it in the way we create models, we use them, and so on. So thank you for being so forthcoming about all of this, and thank you for the amazing work that you're doing on both sides. There were a couple of questions that unfortunately we didn't get to. I believe that as panelists, you can see them in the Q&A. So if you want, and if you don't mind, you can type the answer in writing. One was for Ines, I believe, about multi-language datasets, and one is directly for Anna. But thank you again for this amazing conversation, incredible way to start this day too. So I really appreciate the opportunity to talking with you. Any last notes that you want to leave the audience with, or also how they can reach out to you? It's full of journalists that probably want to collaborate with your team, Ines, if they want to do that.
No, I mean, feel free to reach out. Of course, you know, we have limited capacity, but we always like to work with, you know, organizations that have a development team. We're always happy to support. And yeah, and also, again, I think I said this before, but yeah, the whole field of NLP AI can be intimidating, but I believe, yeah, as journalists, there are a lot of skills you have that maybe also many others don't have, and that make you very valuable in that iterative process of creating these models and doing meaningful things with them. So, yeah.
Thank you,
just
Ines.
the last note from me, guys. I'm very I'm very open to keep talking about this. If you can reach me on LinkedIn or whatever. And we also love collaborating with other publishers or tech companies. So on this note.